The bells of Sainte Geneviève tolled each morning at 5, their iron tongues summoning Paris from sleep. Catherine Desnoyers had heard them every day of her 17 years, first as a foundling left on the convent steps, then as a ward learning needlework and prayer. By 1663 she had memorized their rhythm, the pattern that meant dawn, the sequence for Mass, the urgent clanging that warned of fire. "Your hands are steady," Sister Marie-Thérèse observed, watching Catherine embroider a cope destined for Notre Dame. "You might have made a fine seamstress had you proper patronage." But orphans without dowries had few prospects. The needle trades were controlled by guilds that demanded entry fees Catherine could never pay. Domestic service meant the constant threat of dismissal, or worse, the unwanted attentions of masters who viewed servants as property. When the priest announced that King Louis XIV would sponsor young women to settle New France, offering each 50 livres and a promise of land-owning husbands, Sister Marie-Thérèse had insisted Catherine apply. "Please let us know where you are joining from and if you have a fille du roi in your lineage. In the colonies, your past matters less than your willingness to work," the sister said. "You'll have choices there that Paris will never grant." Catherine wasn't convinced. She had heard stories of New France, endless forests where savages scalped Christian settlers, winters so brutal that men froze standing upright, rivers wider than any road. But when she watched the seamstresses hurrying past the convent, bent under bundles of silk for women who would never learn their names, she understood the sister's wisdom. The selection process took 3 weeks. Royal officials examined the candidates at the Salpêtrière hospital, checking teeth and limbs as if purchasing horses. They asked about health, moral character, domestic skills. Catherine demonstrated her embroidery, her knowledge of herbs for cooking and healing, her ability to read, unusual for her station, a gift from the nuns who had taught their charges basic letters. "You're thin," the official noted, his pen hovering above her name. "I'm strong, monsieur. I've scrubbed floors and carried water since I could walk." He made his mark. Catherine was among the chosen filles du roi, the king's daughters, young women deemed suitable to build France's empire across the Atlantic. They gathered at La Rochelle in May 1663, 93 women between 15 and 30, each clutching a small trunk containing everything she owned. Catherine's held 2 shifts, 1 wool skirt, an apron, her sewing kit, and a small prayer book, the nuns' parting gift. The ship was called l'Aigle d'Or, a merchant vessel being pressed into service for passenger transport. Its captain, a leather-faced Norman named Desjardins, addressed them on the dock. "The crossing takes 6 to 8 weeks if winds favor us," he said. "You'll sleep below in the passenger hold. Do as the crew instructs, stay out of their way, and pray God grants us calm seas." The passenger hold was a dim space beneath the main deck, lined with narrow berths stacked 3 high. Catherine claimed an upper berth near the stern, calculating that the extra height might provide slightly better air. Around her, young women arranged their belongings, their faces showing excitement, fear, or grim determination. "I'm Jeanne Mercier," said the girl in the next berth, a plump blonde with a Burgundy accent. "From Dijon. My parents died of fever last winter. Aunt couldn't feed all us cousins." Catherine Benoit, Paris, orphanage. Jean nodded without judgment. Half the girls aboard were orphans or cast-offs, women who understood that opportunity was often dressed as exile. L'Aigle d'Or sailed with the evening tide. Catherine stayed on deck until the French coast disappeared, watching the land fade into blue. She felt no nostalgia. Paris had given her nothing but charity and hard beds. Whatever awaited in New France could hardly be worse. The first week brought calm seas and novelty. The women explored the ship's confines, learned where to draw water for washing, discovered which sailors would trade conversation for mending services. Catherine spent hours on deck when weather permitted, watching the endless procession of waves. But the Atlantic's moods shifted quickly. By the second week, storms rolled across their path, sending waves crashing over the bow. The passenger hold became a misery of sickness, the air thick with the smell of vomit and unwashed bodies. Catherine proved to have a steady stomach, which earned her the dubious privilege of helping tend the others. "Take this bucket up," Madame Bourdon instructed. The widow had been appointed chaperone, responsible for the girls' welfare and virtue. "Empty it leeward, not windward. You'll learn the difference quickly enough." Catherine learned. She learned to brace herself against the ship's rolling, to keep her knees flexed and weight centered. She learned which hardtack was least weevil-infested, how to make the stale water more palatable with a splash of vinegar, where to stand on deck to avoid being soaked by spray or struck by swinging rigging. Jeanne recovered from her seasickness and became Catherine's closest companion. They talked for hours in their berths, voices low beneath the creak of timbers and the sailors' distant calls. "What will you do if the men in Quebec are all ancient or foul?" Jeanne asked one night. "Marry one anyway. A foul husband with land is better than starving in Paris." "You're very practical." "I'm very tired of being poor." They passed icebergs in the fourth week, mountains of pale blue floating impossibly south of where ice should be. Captain Desjardins ordered extra lookouts, fearing collision in fog. The air grew cold enough that the women needed their wool shawls even in daylight. "New France," Jeanne whispered, staring at a berg that towered above the masts. "It's real." They sighted land on 69 days at sea. The St. Lawrence River mouth was so wide, Catherine initially mistook it for ocean, but as l'Aigle d'Or sailed upriver, forests appeared on both banks, dense green walls of spruce and pine, unlike anything in France. Quebec revealed itself gradually. First the cliffs, then the lower town's warehouses clustered at their base. Finally, the upper town's churches and administrative buildings crowning the heights. The settlement was smaller than Catherine had imagined, more village than city, though its position above the river lent it dramatic presence. The landing was chaos. Officials shouted instructions, merchants haggled over cargo, sailors sang work songs as they unloaded barrels and crates. The filles de roi were herded to the Ursuline convent, where Mother Superior welcomed them with the brisk efficiency of someone well practiced in receiving shipments of young women. "You'll stay here until married," she announced. "We provide room and board. Men seeking wives will come to meet you, always with proper chaperones. You may refuse any suitor, but I encourage you not to be overly particular. These colonists need wives, and you need husbands. Mutual necessity makes for stable marriages." The convent was cleaner than the ship, but hardly luxurious. The women slept in a large dormitory, ate simple meals of pea soup and bread, and spent their days sewing, cooking, and meeting prospective husbands. The men began arriving the next day. They came in a steady stream, farmers, traders, soldiers, craftsmen. Some were young, some weathered by colonial life, a few elderly widowers seeking housekeepers as much as wives. The meetings occurred in the convent's reception room, with Mother Superior or a senior nun always present. Catherine met a carpenter who smelled of wood shavings, a farmer who couldn't meet her eyes, a soldier who bragged about Indians he'd killed. None made her heart quicken, but she evaluated each practically. Could he provide? Did he seem cruel? Would he work her to death before 30? "You might smile occasionally," Jean whispered after Catherine dismissed a miller. "You frighten them with that serious face." "Good. The frightened ones leave quickly." By the third day, most of the other women had accepted proposals. Jean agreed to marry a blacksmith from Montreal, a widower with 2 young children who needed a mother as much as he needed a wife. Catherine attended her friend's hasty wedding at the cathedral, watching her friend exchange vows with a man she'd known for 48 hours. "Are you certain?" Catherine asked beforehand. Jean nodded. "He's kind to his children. That tells me what I need to know." She squeezed Catherine's hand. "Your turn will come. Don't settle for less than you deserve." But what did Catherine deserve? She had no illusions about romance. She wanted safety, a roof, enough food, perhaps, if fortune smiled, a husband who wouldn't beat her. He came to the convent in late afternoon, when the light slanted golden through the windows. Catherine was helping Sister Agnes fold linens when Mother Superior summoned her. "There's someone to meet you." The man in the reception room was perhaps 30, of medium height, with calloused hands and a face marked by smallpox scars. But what Catherine noticed first was his spine, curved in a pronounced hump between his shoulders, forcing him to tilt his head upward to meet her gaze. "Mademoiselle Benoit, this is Gabrielle Moreau, bell ringer at Notre-Dame des Victoires." Gabrielle bowed, the movement awkward with his curved spine. "I asked to meet you specifically." Catherine's surprise must have shown. "Why?" "Sister Agnes mentioned you can read and have good hands for fine work. The church needs someone who can mend vestments, keep the sacristy tidy. My salary is modest, but the position includes a house, small but near the church with good light." "You live alone?" "Till for 3 years since arriving from Rouen. I maintained the cathedral bell tower there before coming to New France." He paused. "I should be honest. Most women refuse me. My appearance troubles them." "Your appearance is your business. Can you provide for a wife?" "Modestly. I supplement my church wage repairing clocks and bell mechanisms for the town. We wouldn't be wealthy, but we wouldn't starve." Mother Superior coughed delicately. "Perhaps you'd like to speak more with proper supervision." They talked for an hour. Gabriel described his work, the daily tolling of church bells, the delicate mechanisms that required constant maintenance, the satisfaction of keeping time for the community. Catherine explained her skills, her pragmatic view of marriage, her lack of romantic illusions. "I don't expect love, but I'd offer respect, a partnership, a shared life built on honest work." "That's more than many offer." They married 4 days later, on July 10, 1663. Father Lemercier performed the brief ceremony at Notre-Dame des Victoires with Sister Agnes and 2 of Gabrielle's fellow craftsmen as witnesses. Catherine wore her best skirt and a borrowed shawl. Gabriel had cleaned his coat and polished his shoes. Afterward, he led her to their home, a small wooden house perched on the cliff edge overlooking the St. Lawrence. The church loomed behind it, its bell tower visible from every window. "It's not much," Gabrielle said, opening the door. But to Catherine, who had never had a room of her own, it was abundance. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a hearth with cooking implements. A small bedroom opened off the back, with a real bed frame and mattress stuffed with straw. Shelves lined one wall, displaying Gabrielle's tools, delicate picks and files for clockwork, heavier hammers for bell maintenance. "The light is good for sewing," Gabrielle said, indicating the large window facing south. "I thought you might set up your work there." That night, they consummated the marriage with the same practical efficiency that had characterized their courtship. Gabrielle was gentle, apologizing for his awkward body. Catherine found the experience neither pleasant nor terrible, simply necessary, like so many things in life. Afterward, as they lay in the darkness, Gabrielle spoke softly. "Thank you for not looking away." Catherine understood. "We all carry something, Gabrielle. Yours is just more visible than most." Catherine's new life quickly developed rhythm. She woke with the dawn bells, prepared breakfast while Gabriel performed his morning rounds. He rang the Angelus at 6, noon, and 6 in the evening, plus additional peals for masses, weddings, funerals, and emergencies. She accompanied him to the tower one morning, climbing the narrow spiral stairs behind him. His hump made the ascent awkward. He had to turn sideways in places, but he moved with practiced efficiency. The bells were magnificent. Notre Dame de Victoire had 3, a great bell named Marie Joseph, weighing perhaps 800 pounds, and 2 smaller bells for different tones. Gabrielle showed Catherine the complex roping system, the clapper weights, the mufflers used during Lent. "The sound carries across the river," he said, running his hand along Marie Joseph's flank. "Settlers downriver set their clocks by our bells." He rang the noon Angelus while Catherine watched, a specific pattern of 3 sets of 3 tolls, followed by continuous ringing. The sound was overwhelming in the enclosed tower, vibrating through her chest and bones. But Gabriel seemed transported, his face peaceful as he worked the ropes with surprising grace. Descending, they passed the sacristy where Father Lemercier kept the church's treasures, chalices, monstrances, reliquaries containing saints' finger bones and cloth fragments. Catherine's new duties included maintaining these items, polishing silver, mending altar linens. "Father trusts you with the key?" Catherine asked. "He trusts the bell ringer. The position carries responsibility." Gabrielle paused outside the sacristy door. "These objects are precious, not just for their material worth, but for what they represent. People pray before these relics, believing them conduits to God." Catherine, whose faith was more practical than mystical, simply nodded. She learned quickly that being married to Gabrielle meant occupying a peculiar social position. The bell ringer was essential, but separate, too common for the merchant families, yet too educated for most laborers. Gabrielle's deformity further isolated him. People respected his work, but avoided personal friendship. Catherine experienced this first at the market. She stood examining turnips when 2 women approached, wives of successful fur traders. "You're the bell ringer's wife," one said, not a question. "Catherine Moreau, yes." "How brave of you." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "To marry such a man." The implication stung. Catherine selected her largest turnip and met the woman's gaze directly. "My husband is skilled, educated, and treats me with respect. How many wives in Quebec can claim all 3? She walked away before they could respond, but her hands shook with anger. That evening she told Gabrielle nothing of the encounter. He already carried enough. Yet not all responses were hostile. Old Madame Fournier, who lived near the church, brought them bread still warm from her oven. "You're good for Gabriel. He's been too much alone. A man needs partnership." Father Lemercier also showed kindness, increasing Catherine's sacristy duties and paying her separately for mending work. The coins helped extend their modest income. And there was Henri Dufresne, a clockmaker, who sometimes consulted with Gabrielle on complex repairs. Unlike others, Henri treated Gabrielle as an equal, discussing mechanisms and mathematics with genuine interest. "Your husband has remarkable hands," Henri told Catherine one day. "His deformity forces him to approach problems differently. He sees solutions others miss." The theft was discovered on October 15th when Father Lemercier opened the sacristy for morning mass. The reliquary of Saint Anne, a silver case containing cloth supposed touched by Christ's grandmother, was gone from its shelf. Father Lemercier's cry brought Gabrielle running from the tower. Catherine arrived moments later, finding the priest white-faced, staring at the empty space. "The reliquary," he gasped. "Gone. The lock wasn't forced. Someone used a key." There were only 3 keys: Father Lemercier's, Bishop Laval's, and Gabrielle's. By noon, the entire town knew. By evening, accusations began circulating. Catherine heard them at the market, whispers that stopped when she approached, resumed when she passed. The hunchback. Always knew something was wrong with him. Probably sold it to English traders. She confronted Father Lemercier in the church. "You know Gabrielle would never steal." The priest looked haggard. "I know, but others don't share my certainty. Bishop Laval has ordered an investigation. Until then, Gabrielle should perhaps keep to the tower for his own safety." Catherine understood. Mob justice in small communities could be swift and brutal. That night, Gabrielle sat at their table, head in his hands. "I should leave, go to Montreal, start fresh." "No," Catherine's voice was sharp. "Running proves guilt. We stay. We find the real thief." "Catherine, you don't understand. People already assume." "Then we prove them wrong." Catherine began by making a list of everyone who had access to the church. Father Lemercier, obviously. The bishop, though he'd been in Montreal for weeks. Gabrielle. The deacon, François Leblanc, who helped prepare for masses. Various parishioners who cleaned or delivered supplies. She observed the sacristy carefully during her cleaning duties, noting details. The lock showed no damage. The thief had used a key or picked the mechanism, unlikely given the lock's quality. The other valuables remained untouched: silver chalices, gold-threaded vestments, pearl-decorated monstrances. Only the reliquary was missing. "Why just Saint Anne?" she asked Gabrielle. "The monstrance is worth 5 times as much." "Perhaps they wanted something portable," Gabrielle suggested. "Easier to hide." Catherine considered. "Or something whose absence would cause specific trouble." The investigation by Bishop Laval's appointed officials was cursory and clearly biased. They questioned Gabrielle harshly, examining his house, searching for the reliquary or evidence of its sale. Finding nothing, they nevertheless made their suspicion clear. "You had opportunity and means," the lead investigator, Monsieur Renaud, said coldly. "Your character is questionable." "My character?" Gabrielle's voice shook. "I've served this church faithfully for 3 years." "You're deformed. God marks sinners in the flesh." Catherine stepped forward before thinking. "My husband is no sinner, and your investigation is incompetent. You've questioned no one else with sacristy access." Renaud's eyes narrowed. "Careful, madame. Defending a thief makes you suspect as well." After they left, Catherine made a decision. If official channels were closed, she would investigate herself. She began with François Leblanc, the deacon, a serious young man preparing for priesthood. He'd arrived in Quebec 2 years earlier from Lyon. Catherine approached him after morning mass. "François, may I ask something?" He tensed slightly. "If it's about the reliquary." "Not directly. I'm trying to understand who knew about all the sacristy's contents. You helped Father Lemercier catalog everything last spring, correct?" "Yes, for the bishop's records." "Was anyone else present during that process?" François thought. "Henri Dufresne came several times. The bishop wanted the silver pieces valued for insurance purposes. Henri is the only qualified assessor in town." Catherine's mind raced. Henri, the clockmaker, Gabriel's friend. But why would Henri need to steal? His business seemed successful. She visited Henri's shop that afternoon, ostensibly seeking a clock repair estimate. The shop was well appointed, but showed signs of financial stress. Dusty inventory, a ledger with crossed-out entries visible on the desk. "Henri." Henri looked surprised. "Is Gabriel well? I haven't seen him since the theft." "He's under suspicion, as you probably know." Henri's expression darkened. "Ridiculous! Gabriel is the most honest man I know." "Then help me prove it. You valued the sacristy pieces. What would the reliquary fetch?" "On the legitimate market, perhaps 300 livres, but selling it would be nearly impossible. Too distinctive, too well known. Anyone offering it would immediately become suspect." He paused. "Unless they could disguise its origins." "How?" "Melt it down. The silver alone would be worth perhaps 80 livres, less than intact, but safer to sell." Catherine thanked him and left, her mind working. If the thief planned to melt the reliquary, they'd need access to a forge or workshop. She walked through town, noting locations: the blacksmith's forge, the silversmith's workshop, the mission's metalworking area. That night, Catherine told Gabriel her suspicions. Someone with financial need, metalworking access, and detailed knowledge of the sacristy's contents. Gabriel looked skeptical. That could describe half a dozen people. Yes, but how many had opportunity on October 14th specifically? They reviewed that day. Father Lemercier had said evening prayers at 6, locked the sacristy afterward. Gabriel rang the evening angelus at 6, then the curfew bells at 8. Between those times, the church had been empty except for François Leblanc, who'd been preparing materials for the next morning's mass. "François has access," Gabriel said slowly, "and he'd know Father's schedule." "But what's his motive? He's preparing for priesthood." The answer came 3 days later, when Catherine overheard conversation at the market. 2 women discussing François Leblanc's sister, young, pregnant, abandoned by her soldier lover. The family was disgraced, desperate for money to send her to relatives in Montreal before her condition became obvious. Catherine returned home with pounding heart. "I know who took it." Confronting François required careful planning. Catherine needed proof, and she needed to ensure he'd confess rather than destroy the evidence. She approached Father Lemercier first, presenting her reasoning. "François has motive, his sister's disgrace and need for money. He has access and knowledge, and he was alone in the church during the critical period." Father Lemercier looked pained. "François is preparing for holy orders, which makes his family's scandal more devastating. A pregnant, unwed sister destroys his prospects. Even if true, we need evidence." Catherine had anticipated this. If he melted the reliquary, he'd need fire hot enough for silver. The mission workshop has a forge he uses for metalwork practice. Search it. If you find traces of melted silver or the reliquary's distinctive metalwork, the filigree corners are hard to completely destroy. You have your proof. Father Lemercier agreed reluctantly. That evening, he and Catherine went to the workshop while François was at prayers. In the ash pit beneath the forge, Catherine found what she sought: small beads of silver, and caught in the grate a fragment of filigree bearing the distinctive pattern from the reliquary's corner. When Francois returned to find them waiting, his face confirmed everything. "Why?" Father Lemercier asked, his voice thick with disappointment. Francois collapsed onto a bench. "My sister, the child, our family. We have nothing. I thought the reliquary was insured, the church would be compensated, and I could save Marguerite from ruin." "By letting an innocent man be blamed?" Catherine's voice was cold. "Gabriel could have been hanged." "I never meant—" Francois looked up, tears streaking his face. "I thought they'd assume a random theft. I didn't know they'd suspect Gabriel." Father Lemercier stood slowly. "You will confess to the bishop. You will return whatever silver remains, and you will pray that God and Gabriel Moreau can forgive you, because I'm not certain I can." The bishop's judgment was severe. Francois was stripped of his position, barred from priesthood, and sentenced to 6 months' labor repairing the church's roof. The remaining silver was returned to the bishop's treasury. Francois's sister was sent to the Montreal convent, her child to be raised by the Grey nuns. Gabriel was publicly exonerated. Father Lemercier made a formal announcement during Sunday Mass, explaining Catherine's investigation and apologizing for the community's rush to judgment. The apology meant less than Catherine had hoped. Some parishioners approached Gabriel with mumbled regrets, but others simply avoided eye contact, embarrassed by their own prejudice. Monsieur Renaud, the investigator, left town without acknowledgement of his errors. "They'll never truly accept me," Gabriel said one evening, watching sunset paint the St. Lawrence orange and gold. "No," Catherine agreed, "but they'll respect you and fear making enemies of us." He smiled at that, his crooked, scarred smile that Catherine had grown to treasure. "You could have let them blame me, could have left, found another husband." "Why would I? We have a good life, and you chose me when others wouldn't. That means something." He took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "You saved me. We saved each other. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Choosing someone and choosing them again each day." The bells in the tower behind them began to toll. Gabriel's apprentice, a new hire to help with daily duties, ringing the evening angelus. The sound rolled across the river, marking time for the settlements below. Catherine leaned against Gabriel's shoulder, feeling his crooked spine beneath her cheek. In Paris, she'd been nobody, a charity case with no prospects. In Quebec, married to a hunchbacked bell ringer, she'd become someone who solved mysteries, who stood against injustice, who built a life through choice rather than circumstance. The bells fell silent. In the quiet that followed, Catherine heard the river's endless flow, the wind in the pines, the distant call of geese flying south. She heard possibility. "Come inside," she said, rising. "I'm making that stew you like." Gabriel followed her into their small house on the cliff edge, where warm light spilled from the windows and dinner waited on the hearth. The door closed behind them, shutting out the judgment and doubt of the town beyond. Inside, they had what mattered: respect, partnership, and the shared life they'd chosen, built not on romance or beauty, but on the harder, more lasting foundations of honesty, work, and the daily decision to stand together against whatever might come. The bells in the tower behind them stood silent, waiting for morning, when Gabriel would climb the spiral stairs and ring in the new day. And Catherine would be there, not because she had to be, but because she'd chosen this life, this man, this improbable happiness found in a strange land far from everything she'd known. The bells would ring, the river would flow, and they would continue together. Historical notes. The Filles du Roi program, 1663 to 1673, brought approximately 800 young women to New France, sponsored by King Louis XIV, with dowries of 50 livres each. Most married within weeks of arrival, as the gender imbalance in the colony was severe.